Today, we're going to repurpose a piece of old fencing and we're going to turn it into something really cool. So our buddy over in California was tearing down a fence, putting up a brand new fence, and he had a bunch of redwood pickets that he was just going to haul to the dump. Asked if we wanted them. Ryan happened to be over there, and so he picked them up, brought them back, and lo and behold, it's some really nice looking redwood. So this is a good example of how you can just take stuff that's going to be thrown away or burnt up and turn it into money. This is going to be a really cool little stock sign that you can make a bunch of them and have them ready when you're going out to your craft shows. Today we're using the stencil of the month for March of 2025. This thing is a really easy carve. If you are an executive member, you get one of these free. If you want to check out the memberships, there's a link in the description below for the premium memberships and the executive memberships. Also guys, don't forget everything we're using today, including the router bits, the base plates, the stencils. We have hundreds of products over at makeawoodsign.com. We fund our entire business on you guys buying supplies from us. So we'd really appreciate it if you head over there, check out, and see if there's anything you need. Here we go.
The thing I like about stencils is that they're super easy to lay out. It also allows you to have kind of a script look. So to hold it flat, Dad put on some vinyl gloves and he's just holding it and kind of moving it around, making sure that he gets a good line. Me personally, I like using clamps just to keep it flat, and I think that works a little better, but hey, to each his own. Now, I did not show prepping the picket. All I did was I cut a piece of it out and I sanded the stain off of it. So my buddy had this fence up for about 6 years and he was able to keep these boards looking really nice with just stain. But it all sanded out in a matter of, I don't know, maybe a minute. Now, when we do stencils, we have to connect some stuff to keep the middle of letters from falling out, like the middles of the F, the O, the E, all that stuff. So it might be kind of easier to do what Dad's doing here and actually color all that in. That way you don't get confused as you're carving. The first bit Dad's using is our profile bit at 3/16 of an inch deep. Now guys, this light setup that's on all of our routers now, it works really good when we do a live. And this is the first time that we filmed everything with these lights on here. And I don't think we're gonna do that again. It's a bit too bright, which kind of sucks because to be honest, at first I didn't like them, but now I really like them. They really put a lot of light on the board and help you see your carving much better. But for video purposes, as you can see here, it's a little bit too bright. So sorry about that. I don't think we're going to do that again, but do me a favor, leave a comment and let me know if you like us using the light or if you wish that we wouldn't have used it in this video. So guys, Dad's doing 3/16 of an inch deep first. Now this board is a tad grainy. It's not terrible, but there's definitely some grain to it. So you'll notice that Dad is ending up going over a lot of areas several different times. To get your initial cut around your letters, stay away from the letter a little bit. Give yourself a little bit of room. Don't try to make it all on the first cut, especially when it comes to a board that you haven't carved before. And redwood does tend to be a bit grainy, so Dad is starting out a little bit away from the lines and he's working his way in. And that really does help you, number one, not destroy what you're carving, but number two, it helps you to kind of get that line. That way you can work your way into it a little bit. The carving on this is pretty simple. Dad's doing this outset, but inset would probably be even more simple, but because everything is kind of bubbly and round, it's not that hard. But with a grainy board, just kind of stay out a little bit and don't get too close on your first cut. So now Dad's got the profile in at a little bit over 1/4 of an inch deep. It's probably somewhere around 5/16. So guys, it's not so much about the depth of the cut as the width of the cut. Now you still want to cut deep, but it's more about how much of the width you're taking out. If you don't know exactly what you're looking for as far as depth, I do recommend getting one of our depth gauges. I never used to use it. I would always just kind of eyeball it, but I was also carving way too shallow. My dad and grandpa both pointed that out to me. So the depth gauge is a great tool if you feel like maybe you're carving a little bit too shallow or even maybe a little bit too deep. It gives you a good point of reference. So Dad's going around all of this to give himself more room because he's going to come back with a 90 degree and do all this outset, make a nice looking freeform cloud, and he's going to carve all the rest of the wood away. And with a 90 degree cut, it cuts pretty wide, so you want to have plenty of room. Dad drew a freeform shape around this. I thought it kind of would have looked good just to widen that line a little bit and not take out so much, but I'm glad Dad ended up doing this. I think it looks better than my idea. But if you have a hard time picturing what it's going to look like, use a pencil and draw it in first. Now Dad's got the 90 degree bit in at 1/4 of an inch deep. Now remember, your pencil line, if you draw it in, it's just a reference. You don't have to stick to it. Everybody's got their different personality and styles. Some guys, or some people, sorry, ladies, some people really like to stick to exactly where that line is. Me and Dad were more of, see how it looks as you're carving. Probably a little bit more me than Dad. So now that the cloud is done, Dad's going to go in and take all of that material out of there. Now with a grainy board, you really got to be careful, guys. It is super easy to get your bit a little bit too close and to actually hit your carving, and that sucks. I've done that a lot. You want to avoid that if you can at all, but make sure you go in and you take everything out. It's also a good idea, I do it, to start with the middle of the letters first and then go around it. Now this brush Dad's using, this is the first time he's used it. This is actually a plastic bristle brush, and Dad really liked it. Normally we use one of those stiff vinyl brushes, but these have real stiff plastic bristles, and they're not going to scratch your board, at least nothing that won't sand out. And it worked great to get all of the sawdust and chunks out of there before you do your spraying. To give this sign kind of a soft look, Dad used the stand-up disc sander, and he just rounded these corners. We've gotten some crap about people saying that we're not doing it right, but Dad's been doing this for like 50 years and it works great, it looks good, and it goes super fast. This was like 30 to 45 seconds. For the edge, we're using the 45 degree chamfer bit, and we're just going to put a chamfer on it. So Dad did just a pretty shallow chamfer on the back to give it a good finished look, and also to make sure you don't get any splinters when you're handling it. And then he put a really deep chamfer on the front. Now, we noticed something when Dad was getting ready to do the chamfer. Because this is redwood, redwood splits all the time, so you really do have to kind of pay attention to that. But he saw just a really small split. So to fix that, all Dad's going to do is tape that off. That way no black spray gets in there. Now once it's all taped off, then Dad's going to spray the back first because of that chamfer, spray the edges, and then spray the face. Notice that he's going to go at a couple of different angles and not overspray and not get crazy with it, but you want to make sure to cover up as much of that wood as you can. Don't forget to take the tape off before you sand it. I've done that, and it just kind of, it's not a big deal, but I don't know, it does kind of create kind of a mess. Always sand the back of your sign off first. That way you're not laying it on a finished face. So we sanded the back off first, and then we used a 80 grit disc on the disc sander and a 120 grit disc on the random orbital. And it's a good idea to spray your sign off in between discs. That way you don't get any of that black sawdust dug into the face of your board. So normally we don't show spraying the back, but we always do. We've just been getting questions about it, so we wanted to film that today. Anytime you make a sign, coat the entire thing, otherwise you're going to get a lot of cupping and warping.
All right, guys, there it is. I'm super happy with the way this came out, especially being an old piece of repurposed redwood that probably would have just ended up in the landfill or in somebody's fireplace. It just gives you an idea that there's a lot of different options out there for repurposing wood. Maybe an old table that somebody just wants to get rid of. There's just a lot of stuff, a lot of options, you know, scraps out from cabinet shops. There's a lot of options out there on taking repurposed wood, stuff that would be just thrown away or burnt, and turning it into money. And this is a perfect example of that, especially being redwood. I have an affinity for redwood. This almost feels like old growth redwood. I don't think it is, but it almost has that feeling. It's got a nice rich look to it, and it carved really well. It was a little grainy here and there, but overall it carved really well. So anyway, guys, hope this is helpful. Hope that you get something out of this. If you have any questions, please email me, eric@makeawwoodsign.com. And don't forget, we've got all these stencils, base plates, router bits, all that stuff over at makeawwoodsign.com. We love you. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.